Board track racing, the 1920s deadliest motorcycle sport. Imagine roaring engines, wooden tracks, and fearless riders pushing the limits of speed without brakes. This was board track racing, the most thrilling yet deadly sport of the 1920s. Riders raced on steep oval tracks made entirely of wood, reaching speeds over 100 miles per hour. So why did riders risk their lives for this dangerous sport? What made fans pack the stands, knowing they might witness disaster? In this video, we'll take you back to the golden age of board track racing, uncovering the most extreme motorcycle sports in history. Let's dive in. The history of board track racing. Board track racing was one of the most thrilling and deadliest motorcycle sports of the 1910s and 1920s. It was a time when speed ruled, and riders risked their lives to race on massive wooden tracks, as newspapers called the tracks murder-dromes. These tracks were made of wooden planks and banked out at extreme angles, allowing motorcycles and racing cars to reach astonishing speeds of over 100 miles per hour. Riders competed on specialized motorcycles, known as board track racers, designed for speed and agility. These motorcycles were lightweight and powerful, with large engines, but lacked the safety features we see in today's motorcycles. The tracks themselves were extremely dangerous due to their high banking, tight turns, and the lack of barriers to protect riders from the crowd or walls. The first board track, the Los Angeles Motordrome, was built in 1910 in Playa del Rey, California. It was inspired by European bicycle velodromes, with 2-inch by 4-inch wooden boards and steep banking of up to 45 degrees. Some tracks, like the one in Culver City, even had banking angles of over 50 degrees, making races incredibly fast and intense. Longer tracks followed, reaching up to 2 miles in length by 1915. Board track racing quickly gained popularity across the United States. During the 1910s and 1920s, families, businessmen, and thrill seekers flocked to motordromes across America. The excitement was electric. People dressed in their best, waving programs and placing bets as they watched fearless racers battle it out on the steep wooden curves. The tracks were designed for maximum visibility, allowing fans to witness every heart-stopping moment. Children idolized racers like Jake DeRossi and Ralph De Palma, collecting posters and newspaper clippings of their heroes. Vendors sold hot dogs, peanuts, and souvenirs, turning race days into grand community events. Photographers captured the action for newspapers, and radio stations broadcasted race results, making board track racing a national obsession. If you're enjoying this deep dive into board track racing, make sure you hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe. It helps us bring more content like this to you. By 1929, at least 24 board tracks had been built nationwide, hosting championship-level races that drew massive crowds. The most famous board track races were held in cities like Los Angeles, Indianapolis, and Daytona. Riders and cars roared around these tracks at speeds never seen before, showing the power of both man and machine. Some of the sport's greatest legends, like Barney Oldfield, became household names for their fearless racing on these wooden circuits. The sport was so popular that it even helped shape the development of motorcycle technology, with manufacturers pushing for faster, more durable machines. The motorcycles, technology, and design. Board track racing motorcycles were a marvel of engineering in the 1920s, designed for speed and thrill. These machines were built to perform at high velocities, with minimal concern for comfort or safety. The most distinctive feature of board track motorcycles was their lightweight design. Engineers focused on making the bike as fast as possible, and this meant removing any unnecessary weight. The frames were typically made from lightweight steel and sometimes aluminum, which kept the bikes agile. The engines were small but powerful, usually ranging from 500cc to 750cc, often single-cylinder or twin-cylinder. These engines delivered incredible speeds, sometimes exceeding 100 miles per hour or 160 kilometers per hour on the narrow wooden oval tracks. The wheels were also quite different from what we see today. They were large, with a simple spoke design, which made the motorcycles lightweight but also vulnerable to punctures. The tires were solid rubber, unlike modern pneumatic tires, which provided limited grip on the slippery wooden tracks. Riders had to rely on their skills to navigate these tricky surfaces. Another important feature was the absence of brakes. In most board track races, motorcycles didn't have brakes, and riders had to use their engines and body position to slow down or control their speed. This added to the danger, as crashes were frequent and often deadly. The only real safety feature was the rider's protective leather suit and helmet, but they offered little protection from the high-speed collisions that were common in the sport. To boost performance, some racers even experimented with advanced technology like lightweight fuel tanks and specialized racing carbs. These modifications gave them a slight edge, enabling the bikes to go faster on the tight, high-banked curves of the tracks. No doubt, board track motorcycles were built purely for speed, leaving safety behind in the quest for victory. The danger factor. That's why board track racing was notorious for being incredibly dangerous, and the risks were not just part of the sport, they defined it. The tracks themselves were built from wood, usually pine, with steep banking and narrow curves. These tracks were often so slippery that racers had little control over their motorcycles, making the sport a constant battle for survival. The steep angles of the board tracks ranged from 35 to 50 degrees, which made it incredibly hard for riders to maintain control at high speeds. With no real barriers to protect them, a crash was not just likely, it was almost guaranteed at some point during a race. The bikes were stripped down to the essentials, with no brakes and often just a basic throttle. This lack of modern safety equipment meant that when crashes happened, they were violent and sometimes fatal. Another major factor in the decline of board track racing was the immense cost of building and maintaining the tracks. Constructing a board track required vast amounts of wood, labor, and money. The speeds riders reached were another huge factor for the danger. Some riders would race up to 120 miles per hour, which was far faster than any other motorsport at the time. At these speeds, even the smallest mistake could be deadly. The tight corners on these tracks made the risk of losing control even higher, and riders would often go flying off the track in catastrophic accidents. Stick around because in just a moment, we'll talk about the deadly crashes that shocked the world and ultimately ended board track racing. And don't forget to hit that bell to subscribe to see more exciting content like this. This intense speed and lack of protective gear for the riders led to a tragic rise in deaths. Riders frequently crashed, leading to horrific injuries and fatalities, giving board track racing a reputation as one of the most dangerous motorsports of its time. In fact, between 1910 and 1920, more than 40 professional racers died in board track accidents. These deaths were not only a result of crashes, but also extreme exhaustion, because races often lasted hours and the high-speed environment wore down the racers both physically and mentally. Among them was Albert "Shrimp" Burns, a fearless competitor known for his aggressive riding style. Fans loved his daring spirit, but his career was tragically cut short in 1921 when he crashed during a race in Toledo, Ohio. Eddie Brink shared a similar fate. A rising star in the sport, he lost his life in 1927 when racing in Springfield, Massachusetts. Then there was Ray Weishar, who met his end in Los Angeles in 1924. Weishar wasn't just a racer, he was part of the team that popularized the nickname Hog for Harley-Davidson, a name that still lives on today. Not all board track racers died on the wooden ovals, but danger followed them. Ralph Hepburn was one of the lucky few who survived the motordromes, but his need for speed never faded. He transitioned to car racing, only to meet his tragic end in 1948 while trying to qualify for the Indianapolis 500. Public outcry against the sport's riskiness grew as fatalities mounted. Many riders, despite knowing the risks, continued to race because of the fame, fortune, and thrill that it brought. However, the extreme danger and frequency of accidents eventually led to the decline of board track racing. Board track racing's decline. The Great Depression in 1929 further worsened financial conditions, making the upkeep of these tracks unfeasible. By 1931, 20 out of the 24 tracks had been shut down or abandoned, and by 1932, championship-level board track racing was gone, replaced by safer alternatives. The public's taste for entertainment was shifting, and other forms of motorsport like dirt track racing began to gain popularity as safer and less expensive alternatives. By the end of the decade, many tracks had shut down or repurposed for other uses. The safety concerns, the financial burden, and the rise of newer, less hazardous motorsports marked the slow but certain end of board track racing. Though the sport had captivated fans in its prime, it eventually became too dangerous and unsustainable, fading into history by the mid-1930s. However, despite its disappearance, the sport's legacy lives on. The emphasis on high-speed banking, wide tracks for overtaking, and stadium-style spectator seating continues to influence modern motorsports today. Legacy of board track racing. It was the foundation for the evolution of motorcycle racing, influencing modern events like the Daytona 200. Many of today's high-speed racing innovations, such as safety gear, bike modifications, and track designs, were born from the lessons learned in the deadly world of board track racing. Do you think the sport should make a comeback but with better safety precautions? Or is it a big nah? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Although the sport itself faded by the late 1920s due to safety concerns and the rise of other forms of racing, the legacy of board track racing lives on. It shaped the future of motorcycle racing, inspiring generations of racers and fans, and leaving behind a fascinating chapter in motorsports history. And that's the story of board track racing, the thrilling but dangerous sport of the 1920s. It was fast, wild, and deadly, but it paved the way for modern motorcycle racing. What do you think? Would you have dared to race on those wooden tracks? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories from the past. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.